You're listening to Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair. For more information, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at SBT Songs, or check us out at chrisblair.com. Hey guys, Chris Blair here, and this is another episode of Stories Behind the Songs. This week's guest, I'm so excited, is Adam Sanders. Adam's been playing the listening room for many years now. He's written tons of songs for great artists and makes music of his own. He's got an EP called Like It's Your Last that he put out in November, and he's got a new full album coming out February 2nd. Like many of our guests, Adam is a songwriter right here in Nashville, Tennessee. He's got cuts with Cole Swindel, Dierks Bentley, Scotty McCreery, Dustin Lynch, Blake Shelton, and many more. He was one of the writers on Cole Swindel's Ain't Worth the Whiskey, which became his first #1. We're going to talk about how he got his start in Nashville writing with Cole. Also Josh Martin, before either one of them had ever made it big in the music industry. He's going to take us into the writer's rooms when he wrote Ain't Worth the Whiskey. You'll also hear about the process of that song going to radio, and also the story with Hell of a Night, which is a great cut that he's got with Dustin Lynch. Apart from his successes as a songwriter, Adam talks about how writing is so meaningful to him and how chasing that story and the goals that he has in the industry are like so important for him, both with writing songs for artists and making his own music. Just some really great stuff there. Keep an eye out for Adam's new album that, like I said, is coming out next month, February 2nd. Give him a follow to stay up to date. And if you enjoyed this episode of Stories Behind the Songs, please give us a follow. Check that notification button so you can stay up to date with brand new episodes. We are so excited to kick off 2024 and just bring great artists to the seat and share their stories. So also, as always, a big shout out to our sponsors, Sennheiser, Imperfect Esthetician, and All Clear In-Ears. And by the way, if you're looking for a great set of in-ear monitors, make sure to take advantage of our code SBT Songs and get 10% off at checkout. All right, let's get to this week's episode. Here is Adam Sanders. All right, here we are with Adam Sanders in the house. How you doing, brother?
What's happening, man? Is this the first one of 2024?
This is the second one.
Ooh, yeah, hey, you guys are on the ball.
But it's it's still it's good to be celebrating the new year and just all through it, kicking it off 24 strong. So,
well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Let's just go back, kind of like I do on all these episodes, and just I like to share the story of how you got to Nashville and how you got into music in the first place. So,
yeah, man. So I grew up in North Central Florida, a little town called Lake City, and music was like A1, day one for me. Like it was the only thing I ever thought about. I vividly remember being 3-4 years old and singing to Alan Jackson songs as a kid, and just anywhere I would go to a restaurant or to a family member's house or whatever, I was just always singing. And I remember looking at him as like my childhood idol. And so I think Alan Jackson's what really got me into music. I performed all the way up through like middle school and just talent shows and fairs and festivals, and same thing through high school. And the fate of kind of how I ended up actually in Nashville when I did and how I got my start was, so I have an uncle that is in the music industry here in Nashville. He's a session musician, so he plays on all of the big albums. He's played on everything from Sam Hunt to George Jones. He's a steel guitar player. So he moves to Nashville when he's like 14 or 15 years old. His name's Scotty Sanders, and so he's in Nashville doing his thing, playing for all these big, artists and on the albums. And when I was about 12 years old, he called my dad one day and he asked to speak to me. And he said, "Hey," he said, "have you ever thought about writing songs?" And at 12 years old, I'm like, no. And he said, well, he started explaining to me, he said, "Look, all these songs you like on the radio, somebody had to write it, whether it was the artist or the songwriters." He explained to me, and he said, "You should look into writing songs. That could be your way in the music industry one day, because I know you want to move to Nashville." So I hung up the phone. The next day, my dad helps me write the first song I ever wrote, which was terrible. Started to write in high school and realized that I enjoyed the process of it. And I would go to these field parties when I was, in high school, and we'd all be sitting around, a fire, and at the end of the night, I'd bring my guitar out and be like, hey, I wrote this song this week. And all my, classmates and friends would be like, oh, my God, that's so awesome. It's so good. And so I got a lot of confidence from that. And so I moved to Nashville in 2009. I graduated high school in 2007, moved to Nashville. My dad was already living in Nashville. So a lot of my dad's side of the family had migrated to Nashville area through my uncle being here.
Yeah.
So my grandparents were up here. My parents got a divorce when I was about 6, and so my dad had moved here when I was about 10. And so I had some family based here. So I moved in with my dad, worked in construction with him as soon as I got here. And I kind of played this game for a couple years where I would go work with my dad for like a week, and then I would go shadow my uncle in the studios. So I would say, hey, what's your schedule this week? And he'd be like, hey, I'm at Ocean Way on Monday and County Q on Tuesday and blah, blah, blah. And I would just go sit in on the session and just was the guy that was just the young kid in the room just watching all this stuff unfold. Started making some connections through that. And then I would go out at night and I would go to places like the Listening Room, or I'd go to, Tin Roof, or, Whiskey Jam events, whatever, and just started meeting people and just kind of got into that whole thing. Of course, this was back in the MySpace days. So, I had a MySpace, and some songs that were, on there of mine, and started kind of networking through that. And after about 2 years being in town, signed a publishing deal with Big Yellow Dog Music. And from there, man, it was just kind of crazy. 6 months into my first deal, I got my first cut with Luke Bryan, which was crazy.
Yeah. Let's talk about, that's all of it happened pretty quick, because 2 years for a pub deal is pretty impressive.
Yeah, man. I literally moved when I was 21, and by the time I'm, 23, I've got a publishing deal. Yeah. And my draw was, really small, back then. But man, I'll tell you a crazy story. When I signed my publishing deal, though, I never really grew up with much in life. Like, I lived in a double-wide trailer my whole life, and when I moved with my dad, here, he lived in a single-wide trailer in this trailer park, and now he's got, some land and some stuff. But at this particular time in my life, we were, scraping up pennies, know, and when I signed my publishing deal, it was in December, and I remember driving to go sign my contract. And I remember being so broke that I looked at my gas gauge and it was like on E.
No way.
And I had no money in my bank account. Well, this is how young and naive I was. Again, I'm 23 at the time. I'm like, okay, well, when I sign, they're going to give me my first week's or my first month's check. Well, I signed the contract, and they shake my hand like, all right, we'll see you, on Monday. And I'm like, go back out to my truck, and I crank it up, and it's like below E. And I'm like, I'm in a pickle. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, how am I going to get home? Yeah. I literally had to go back inside and explain to them, like, hey, I thought you guys were going to cut me a check today, and I have no money, no gas money. And literally the owner of the company pulls his wallet out, gave me $100 and was like, we'll see you on Monday.
Man, I got chills right now. Yeah. What a story, dude. Yep. Wow. Yeah. And then you went on, you've got great songs you've written for, like you said, Luke, Cole Swindell, Blake Shelton, like, let's shift into that and dive into stories behind the song. So, you're 2 years in, you get a loan for gas money, and then you start writing, and then you start cranking out some hits. So,
I mean, man, like the first song that I got recorded by Luke was such a special moment for me because I wrote this with Cole Swindell, who became one of my really good friends early in my career. He's a guy that I met through another buddy of ours that introduced us. We started writing together. We later had a #1 together, with him. But this particular time in my career, it was the first write that I had at the Big Yellow Dog office. And I was excited, to have my own publishing deal and room, and so I'm like, hey, you guys come to my office, today instead of like coming to my house or whatever. And so it was me, Cole, and our buddy Aaron Goodvin. We set in to write a song, and I think we were actually thinking of something for like a Keith Urban is what the vibe was and what my interpretation was of it. But Cole happened to be still selling T-shirts for Luke out on the road, so we write this song, we demo it. Cole plays it for Luke on the bus one night, and Luke's like, yeah, I want to record it. So he calls us all excited, like, hey, I played it for, Luke. He wants to record it. And the beauty of the music industry is like, okay, at that point, we're on cloud 9 because I'm like, man, my first cut could be from Luke Bryan,
Massive.
Which is, I mean, these are back in the days when albums sold, a lot, and Luke is the hottest guy in our format, so it's like coming out of the gate, just swinging. And so then a month or two goes by, and it's like, man, I don't think it's going to make the record. And then it's down in the dumps again. And then it's like, okay, well, I think it's going to make the record, but it's going to be in the Target Deluxe, and then you're like, well, that's something, at least that's, and then it's,
welcome to the music
then
industry.
It's like, well, it could be a single. And then it's just, your emotions are all over the place.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this is fast forward 3 or 4 months, and I'm riding with Cole and Michael Carter one day at Sony ATV Tree. We're writing a song. We're halfway through it. Cole's phone starts ringing. It's Luke. And Luke says, hey, you guys come down to Ocean Way. We're cutting, for the album. Well, at this point, I had no idea if the song was going to be recorded or not. So we all were like, well, screw this song. Let's go and see what they're doing. As soon as we walk in, they're starting to record my song and Cole's. And Luke walks up and he gives me a big hug and he says, hey, man, congratulations on your first cut. And that was a huge moment for me to know that, like, okay, well, if I can get Luke Bryan to record a song, anything is possible in my career. And to be and to even speak of the guy that he was, knowing what that was going to mean for me in my career. And at that point, like, I'd seen Luke out a couple times and shook his hand, but we didn't, have a real friendship. But whether he meant to do it or he didn't, how impactful that was for, like I said, like, he invited us there, whether it was just the timing or he knew what he was doing, but they are just hitting the intro. I walk in, 23, 24-year-old kid. He gives me a hug, and he was like, congratulations. I mean, that was very special for me.
Yeah. How did that song come about?
Well, like I said, we were kind of thinking, it's called Out Like That.
Yep.
It's on the Crash My Party album for Luke Bryan, and I think it ended up being track 9. Like I said, I think we were just kind of like thinking that it was like something for Keith Urban. It had kind of this this thing. I remember it felt real rocking. I was kind of like that kind of thing. So just a grungy kind of thing. And I was kind of like trying to take it back to like, some of that early, like Keith Urban, you look good in my shirt kind of thing, and man, I just remember like it was the first song that I wrote in the office, and we had this line in there that was like, I want to feel your heart go tick-tock while the rain from your hair drip drops. And that was before the tick-tock drip drop thing had like been worn out in country music. We were like one of the first people to kind of do that thing. And I feel like that was kind of I feel like every song has a special thing about it, and I think that was it for that particular song. And it ended up being cut by Luke and was part of the I think that album was album of the year or album of the decade for ACMs, which was wild, to be on it.
Yeah,
and, I think it was almost 5 times platinum at this point. So one that was very special. They say you'll never forget your first. So that was first.
Yeah, that's great, man. So then what was kind of the snowball effect after that? Did it come quickly or did
like it was wild, man. It was, to be honest with you, I remember those days thinking, I don't think I ever looked at like, okay, this is easy, but I'd worked really hard, and I'd started, writing in high school and started singing when I was 3 or 4. And so like, I had a lot of pride in the fact of like, okay, all of my hard work is paying off, here and things really, it was there for a couple of years. It was almost like I couldn't miss, man. Like, I think the next thing I got cut was another song that Cole and I had written, called Carolina Eyes that Scotty McCreery recorded. That one was on the Target Deluxe, edition. And we had actually wrote it Alabama Eyes, and he changed it to Carolina Eyes because he's from Carolina. So we had that one. Then it went to like Tyler Farr. I had a song called Raised to Pray from Tyler Farr. Dierks Bentley recorded a song called Sounds of Summer. that was another big moment for me. I mean, I grew up singing Dierks Bentley's karaoke tracks.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Leaving Left to Do, you know, at talent shows, and here we are getting a cut by him. And then Cole gets a record deal, and there was 2 songs that I had written before I had a publishing deal that I truly feel like got me a publishing deal. One was a song called A Dozen Roses in a Six Pack. That was on Cole's first album. Funny story about that. I remember having that title when I was like 12 or 13.
Really?
Yes. But I had always thought of it as 2 dozen roses and a six pack. And now looking back, I'm like, okay, duh, because that was a Shenandoah song, 2 dozen roses.
Mm-hmm.
And I put 2 dozen roses in a six pack. And I actually brought the title up in the room one day as a joke because we had went through all of our stuff and nothing was really hitting. And I remember telling Aaron, and Aaron Goodvin's on the song also, same as the one with the Out Like That.
Yeah,
us 3 had written some really good stuff back in those early days, and I remember joking. I was like, I got this song called A Dozen Roses, 2 dozen roses in a six pack, and I was kind of hoping they were going to kind of laugh, and they looked and were like, whoa, that's actually pretty good. I was like, really? I was like, because I've had that since I was like 12, and we ended up writing it, A Dozen Roses in a Six Pack. Cole records that for his debut album. And then the song that really changed everything for me was a song called You Ain't Worth the Whiskey that I wrote with Cole and our buddy Josh Martin, who actually who introduced me to Cole back in the day. Back to the MySpace stuff. I remember having a MySpace page. I found this guy, Josh Martin, on MySpace, and reached out to him and did what every young songwriter does is, hey man, we should write.
Yep.
And luckily he hit me back and was like, yeah man, he was like, I like your stuff, and we should get together and we write a song. And when we're done, he says, man, he's like, I got this buddy of mine that I feel like you guys need to meet. He was like, he's out selling T-shirts for Luke now. And he said, but I just feel like you guys would get along together. When he gets back in town, let's watch some Braves baseball, or, maybe try to write a song or something. And ended up being Cole. And I remember literally from the first time we hung out, I was like, man, something special about him, and like our friendship could be really cool.
Yeah.
And started writing songs. And the day that we wrote Ain't Worth the Whiskey, I was still working in construction with my dad. Cole is selling T-shirts, but he had just signed a publishing deal at Sony ATV. And Josh Martin was a security guard officer at Belmont. And so literally 3 guys that had really nothing going on, like just green, young, and hungry. And we were writing in the evenings because I would work through the day. Josh was working midnights. And so we were kind of finding that time between 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock to write before Josh would go into work. So we go to Sony ATV one day, and we do typically like how we always start. We pull our phones out and start going through titles, and we'd went through 5 or 6 things, and nothing was really sticking. And Josh said, hey, I got this title called You Ain't Worth the Whiskey. And Cole and I stopped for a second, and we were like, yeah, it's cool. And we kept looking for other titles. And luckily, after 5 or 6 more titles, Cole stops and was like, guys, why are we not writing You Ain't Worth the Whiskey? Like, that's the best thing that we've got, and it's awesome. And Cole, I think, was going through a breakup at the time. And I think it was on his mind to try to write something, to his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend that, I remember distinctly, like we would record work tapes on our phones and we would send them out to everyone that we knew. So in my mind, I'm thinking he wants to write something he can send to her, and so like, and as we're in this room, like, the crazy thing was like I was kind of playing guitar, and the song has this cool chord in it, but that didn't come around until we go to demo it, because in the room I wasn't a good enough guitar player to even find that chord. I didn't even know what that was. The lead guitar player in the session is the one, I think his name was Troy Lancaster, suggested that chord. I was playing it like this, and I was going like this little, more of like a dirty thing, and then going here. And so I just start playing that little riff, and And we were, you know, like, all right, well, what can we, you know, talk about? And I just remember, like, blurting out, you know, I don't care that you done me wrong, 'cause I've already moved on. I don't care what his name is, and girl, it is what it is. And we just, like, when that started, it was just immediately, like, the next stanza started. And somebody was like, I don't waste a dime. And so we get to the chorus of the song, and we're like, all right, you know, let's see what we got. And I remember getting to the bridge, and I remember thinking, all right, this is really good. Like, we were all high-fiving, fired up. But we get to the bridge, and we're like, all right, what else can we say, you know? And we contemplated for a little bit, well, maybe it doesn't need a bridge. And then we're like, yeah, but something's kind of missing. And I don't really remember whose idea it was, but we were like, okay, let's raise our glasses to, like, the military. And we were like, okay, yeah, that could be big. I have a brother that was 20 years in the Air Force, and Cole has a best friend that was an Army Ranger, and we kind of were thinking of those guys. But I truly believe that the song ended up being as big live as it still is today.
100%.
Because of the bridge. Like,
Yeah.
that was, like, the moment. And we get there, yeah, man, and, like, when we said saving our asses overseas, it was kind of that last hoorah, you know? And so we always joked about that song because, again, you know, when we wrote it, none of us had anything going on. And we all three were inspiring artists and songwriters, and we all three said, hey, like, whoever gets a record deal first is going to record this song. And the song started getting put on hold. I think Luke had it on hold at one point. I know Montgomery Gentry had it on hold. Easton Corbin had it on hold. Cole gets a record deal and was true to his word. He was like, I'm recording this and putting it out. It ended up being his third number one and my very first number one.
Yeah.
Yep.
How was that? I know a dumb question, but yeah, just to talk about the emotion of, like, you know, it's the first number one. It's huge.
Surreal. Man. And to be honest with you, like, so again, like, my story of how fast things started happening was kind of lightning in a bottle. So my first two radio singles went to radio the same exact day. So Ain't Worth the Whiskey, and then I had another song that I wrote for Dustin Lynch called Hell of a Night, and they both were shipped to radio as singles.
Okay, hold on. I didn't know this. I didn't know those were the same day.
Same exact day.
Wow. Okay, keep going.
So Ain't Worth the Whiskey flies up the charts, and takes 24 weeks, I think, to go number one. So that was my first number one. Hell of a Night, it took 56 weeks. It was a slow burner. It gets to number one. But the way that the timing of it happened is I ended up having my second number one party before I had my first number one party. So I have my second number one party first. So then when we have the Ain't Worth the Whiskey number one party, because Cole was so busy and so hot that he was, like, bunching them together. So he wanted to have, like, his second, third, and fourth, and fifth number one party all together so he could just, you know, knock them all out. So it was like, I feel like
what a problem to have, right?
Yeah, like it was probably a year and a half after the song was number one before we ever even got to celebrate it. And I distinctly remember this was such a lesson for me. And this is for anyone out there that's in these situations. And I tell my buddies all the time this, but my publisher comes up to me at the number one party for Ain't Worth the Whiskey, and she says, Adam, she was like, you don't really seem very excited to be here. And I'm like, well, I am, but it had kind of worn off, like the feeling of, like, I got a number one. And I had, at that particular time, Michael Ray had recorded a song called Real Men Love Jesus, and it was flying up the chart. And I had the opportunity to have a triple play award, which is 3 number ones in 1 year. And so my mind was on to that of, like, man, we got to get this thing to number one, even though I had no control over it. But I was focused on that, not really relishing in what had already happened, soaking up the moment. And I was like, yeah, I am. I said, but I'm on to the next one. And she stopped me and she said, hey, she said, you should really, really try to take these moments in, she said, because you don't really know when you're going to get these again. And because things started happening so fast for me, I did not take that and really let it sink in. I was just like, sure, like this one's going to go number one also. It ended up dying at 15, and I didn't get the triple play award. And then you look back on all these years, and you're like, man, I really should have soaked that in a little bit more, you know, because you started to count your chickens before they hatch. But yeah, man, it was just, I think it was one of those things where, like, it was young. It was a whirlwind, you know, 24, 25. I've got 2 number ones. Couldn't tell me anything, you know, that I didn't already know, you know, sort of thing. But at the same time, it was a lot of fun to do it with guys that, like, I was doing life with.
Yeah,
like that's what meant
sure.
the most, you know. Like I'm standing on stage with Cole. It's his 3rd number one. We've dreamed about, hey, you're going to get a record deal one day, and this song is going to impact your career, or I'm going to get a record deal and I'm going to put it out, or, you know, and like that was the special thing about it, was doing it with the people we were doing it together with.
This episode is brought to you by Brit Skin Beauty. Located in the beautiful Indulgence Medi Spa in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, Brittany is the go-to esthetician for facials, dermaplaning, microdermabrasion, waxing, lashes, and any skincare products and consultations. So many people in the music industry use her frequently, and her work speaks for itself. To schedule your next consultation or make an appointment, visit britskinbeauty.com or send an email to britskinbeauty@gmail.com.
Man, that's such great advice. We've got a lot of the same friends that are artists, and I see it a lot with the artist, you know, who get their deal and they're just like, they're on radio tour, they're like just nonstop, you know, like fairs and festivals, and just go, and then it's a year later and they're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know, so just to just stop and take those moments in is
I try to do the best I can with guys that are having their first number one.
Yeah.
Like, because I know, like, again, you only get one first. I try to reach out to those guys as much as I can and be like, hey, you know, like, soak this moment up. And I don't really go into my story, but I go into the fact of, like, hey, you only get one.
Yep.
Make sure, you know, that you're soaking it all in, you know, sort of thing. And so, but yeah, it was crazy. And, you know, Hell of a Night was obviously a big song. Crazy quick story about that. I was playing a Whiskey Jam event, met Dustin. He come up to me after the show and was like, man, I really like what you do. Find myself on the bus with him writing songs 2 months later, literally. I jump on a bus. We go to Syracuse, New York one night. And I remember Shay Mooney from Dan and Shay happened to be in town. I think they were doing a radio show or something. He hops on the bus, and we're all hanging out. And he gets off the bus, and Dustin, I was out with Zach Crowell, which is Dustin's producer now. Zach and I were writing, you know, a lot then. And I had written a song with Zach like 2 months prior that something just told me to play for Dustin. And I was kind of playing it as a reference. Like, I wasn't necessarily pitching him the song, but I wanted to, like, play in hopes, because his thought was, hey, I've got all of my slow stuff figured out for the album, all the mid-tempo. I need a show opener for this project. I need that track one, you know, album starter, and I need, like, when we start our show, I need that one. And I remember thinking about the song. It was actually on hold for Jason Aldean at the time, but I'm like, well, maybe I can inspire him a little bit by playing him this and be like, can we get in this world a little bit? I play him the song. As soon as it's done, he was like, well, why can't I have that song? And I'm like, well, it's on hold for another artist, you know? And so, like, he literally pulls his phone out, like, calls a label and was like, I got to have this song. And it ended up being Hell of a Night. And, yeah, he ended up with it, and it was crazy, man. So it was all because I just decided to play him as a reference, and I really honestly wasn't thinking like, ooh, I need to play this so he can record it. It was more of a reference point, but he loved it so much that he wanted to record it himself.
Did you still write one?
We did. We wrote several songs. Nothing really made the project. I remember a song we had called Texas Got Prettier that I always have loved, the song that I wrote with Dustin years ago and Zach while we were out on that project or on that writer retreat. And one that kind of floated around a little bit. But yeah,
I guess those rights were a lot easier, you know, with the first one you play him, he's like, I want that one. Now let's just have some fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of, but it was one of those things like he was like, I don't think we knew the logistics of if it was going to work out for him to have it.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it was technically on hold for another artist. You know, it was Aldine, and they happened to be label mates, and so, but that was a big confidence of like, okay, well, at least he likes the song here. You know, I think, you know, we're in a good spot, you know, per se. But yeah, man, it was a lot of fun back in those early days, and then, you know, from there, several other, you know, songs got recorded. I've had some sentimental ones, which was really cool. Tracy Lawrence recorded the song that I got to write with Tracy Lawrence on one of his latest projects. It was my child, you know, one of my heroes. You know, without his music, I wouldn't be in Nashville. A song called "Made in America." I went to his house and wrote it, and so that was sentimental. And I also had a song that Shenandoah recorded that they did a duo or duet with Blake Shelton. It was called "Then a Girl Walks In." They did an album where they did a collaboration of you know, current artists and them, and that was one that was, you know, again, a sentimental thing. And I remember telling my dad one day when I found out that they were going to record the song and Blake was going to be on it, that I was like, man, it's crazy to me how I needed Shenandoah's music to be inspired to move to Nashville, and now they need my music to continue their career. And it was a full circle thing for me. And so it's man, I've been very blessed and very fortunate for sure.
Well, you got the talent, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've asked this on a lot of other episodes to my guests. And I know it's like asking you to choose your favorite child. But do you have a favorite song that you've written?
Man, yes and no. I mean, I feel that, like, you know, each one of them have such a special thing, you know, because, like, okay, you look at it from like, all right, which was the most successful, which was sentimental, you know, but I'll play one that I feel like this song should have just, like, I feel like it just did not get its time in the sun, and like, because it died at 15.
Yep.
And
Michael's.
Yeah. And it was one that I wrote with the Warren Brothers and Lance Miller. And I remember one of the guys came in and they were like, hey, I saw this bumper sticker and it just said "Real Men Love Jesus." And like, let's write that. And I'm like, I have no idea how to write that, you know, like, sort of thing. And we just started thinking, you know, about certain things. And I remember we wrote that the first line of this song was actually "Real Men Love Women." And the label, I think, changed it to "Real Men Love Fishing." And we weren't necessarily like trying to be controversial, like, you know, with that statement. It was more of men love women, not like young and mature girls. You know, women are more mature, and you know, if you're a real man, well, then you love a real woman. You know, like, sort of thing, not the opposite sex, or, you know, whatever per se. And I think they thought that might be a little controversial, so they changed the line of the song. But this song was rocking up the charts, got to 15, and I'm thinking it's going there. And they literally pulled it off radio on Easter weekend. And it has Jesus in the title for you know, and the label just said, hey, like, all the stations that are playing it. The ones that are not going to play it because of it having Jesus in the title aren't going to play it. And so it fizzled out. But this was one that was like just one of my favorites, just because of, you know, what some of the lines in it is.
Yeah.
Real men love fishing, fast cars and living out on the edge so far they're gonna need forgiving. And real men like football, and cowboys and outlaws. They can't help but fly so high it's gonna hurt to fall. They like Saturday nights out on the town, a Sunday morning coming down, a pretty girl out on the dance floor spinning, around and round and round they go. A cold beer and a dirty hand, calling home every chance they can. to say I love you. They don't need a reason. Real men love Jesus. Real men love Jesus.
Man, that's such a great song.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I know we only have a little bit of time left.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears because you've got an EP coming out, and I want to make
Got
sure
an
we
album.
touch. Yeah,
Full album. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to make sure we touch on that. So February, is that right?
February 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah, man. It's crazy. This is my sophomore full-length project. Through all of my songwriting success, being an artist is what I moved to Nashville ultimately to do. And I knew that songwriting was just sort of my way to get my foot in the door. And so, man, we've just been very fortunate and blessed to have built this organic, independent thing since I started releasing music as an artist in 2015. Had some songs on SiriusXM The Highway, and we've just been able to groundswell this thing slowly but surely. We've reached over 200 million streams independently with no label.
Yeah.
And so this is my second project that is a full-length project. I'm really excited about. It's available for pre-save, pre-order, all that now. It's called Right in the Middle of It is the title of the album. And one I'm super proud of and excited for the world to hear. And, yeah, man, we're just going to keep rocking and putting out songs and trying to write songs for other people. And at the end of the day, it's like, for me, music is what I do. And so regardless of if I never get another cut, if I never get a number one as an artist, if I never get a record deal, whatever, or if I, sell out Bridgestone 27 times in a row, music's what I do, and it's what I'll always do to the day, I die. It's just in me, so it's going to be done in some capacity. So we're excited. The album comes out February 2nd of this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure that we put links to how everybody can follow you and keep up to date with tour and album
absolutely.
release and all of that kind of stuff in our notes here. But yeah, man, just it's been awesome just to hear part of your story, and I can't wait to just keep following and see what happens.
Thank you, man, and I can't wait to get back to the listening room and play. This place has been one of my favorites from day one. I've had a lot of great memories and moments here, and so excited to come back and be on the stage.
Yeah, before the show, I heard you talking to Zach, so we'll make sure that we get you some dates.
Right.
So
that's right.
Yeah, man, I just, I also just want to point out, I love how humble you are and your approach with writing. If you want to touch on this a little bit, I'd love to hear, kind of where that comes from. But, I've heard you say before, like your process of writing and how, you really focus on trying to be very unique. And whether it's, maybe writing for your project or for someone else, but it's not just like beers and trucks. It's what started that? Like your thought process of why you try to be so different and unique in those.
Well, I've certainly had a lot of those beer and truck songs that I've released as an artist or have had recorded, but I'm a product of like 90s country, and my interpretation of 90s country is 90s country was one of the best eras of music to tell a story, and their hooks
100%.
They had a really cool way of taking a title, and by the end of the song, the title would mean something different by the time they got to the end of it.
Yep.
And I was always such a fan of that. And so I think that's the roots of it, for me is these days of, finding, as crazy as it sounds, I think the industry right now, more than it's been in a very long time, is ready for songs that have big stories and has some roots to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mind now is, in a way, sure, like we're going to write, the beer and the truck songs and falling in love and falling out of love. But my mind goes to like, okay, how can I write a scenario that is real life? But if I was to tell you, hey, I want to write a song about blah, you would be like, how are we ever going to do that? And my mind is, well, it's the challenge of it. I take a song. Zach and I were talking. Cole has a song called 3 Feet Tall that he just released. That a buddy of mine, Jordan Walker, is a part of writing that song. And he was saying how when they wrote the song, Trey Lewis came in and said, "Hey, I want to write a song about my parents' divorce." And it's like, how many of those songs exist in the world, you know? And so when you do it and do it right, that's why it's so impactful. Or, Cody Johnson has a song called Dirt Cheap, that I reference of like, man, what a massive song. But the concept behind it is this old, sharecrop farmer that these guys want to buy his land to build a subdivision, and they're going to pay him really good money, and everyone else is sold, but he's like, hey, I can't do it. You can't buy dirt cheap, that kind of dirt cheap, because I've got all these memories that I still see here, and like that, just the concept of it is taking dirt cheap and flipping it, is really cool to me. So those are things that I really try to focus on and try to find things that matter. And like the pillars of my brand have always been family, faith, fitness, the outdoors, and music. And so if any of those things can tie in, if I can throw a little bit of, a good positive message into something, or have, some 90s country referencing, to it and the style of it, man, that's my bread and butter.
I love it. We'll keep doing it, man.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Last question.
Yep.
I know you've listened to some of these episodes, so you know what's coming. But if you can go back to 8-year-old Adam in Florida, knowing what you know now, you've gotten your pub deal, you've gotten your hits, all that. What kind of advice do you give 8-year-old self?
To keep going and not ever give up. I was never the guy that was the best singer, the best guitar player. I didn't really, take lessons for anything. There were several years through my whole life, like I would play a local talent show, and one year I would place first, and the next year I wouldn't even place. It was just like there was never any like consistency. But I've always just had, I think, such a passion for it, and I've always had my teachers and family members of like, man, just keep going, never give up, because I would always just get a little bit better, like, and still to this day, like I'm inching forward. I feel like my best songs are ahead of me. My best live shows and, all that stuff, those years are ahead of me. I feel like I'm just now kind of turning the corner of like, all right, like I kind of deserve to, good enough to be on the field. And so, yeah, it's been a long road in the fact of a lot of people start singing and playing music when they're like in college, later in life.
Yeah.
8-year-old me was like so immersed in like, man, I'm the kid that's in the bedroom like practicing my Entertainer of the Year speeches, at 8 years old, literally, like thinking out, like, hey, this is what I'm going to say one day. And I've had, some success, but there's still a lot of things that, I still want to accomplish. And so I kind of feel like where I'm at in my career right now, I'm halfway up the mountain. But if I would have thrown in the towel, years ago and just kind of chalked it up of like, man, this shitting in the cards, go find a real job and, not try to go to, Big Yellow Dog on, an empty tank of gas and, expecting to get paid, and having to literally humbly ask for $100. I mean, there's been a lot of moments like that been in my career where financially, like somebody's helped me out or, done some things. And so I would say, man, just keep going and everything that you've envisioned is possible and is there. You just got to keep your head down and keep working.
Love it. Great advice. And we're glad that you didn't give up. A lot of songs that we all love wouldn't have been created.
Yeah, man. And we hope there's many more in the future, too.
Absolutely. Yep. There's going to be. So, Well, dude, Happy New Year.
Same to you,
Thanks for being
Appreciate
here.
You having me.
It's been fun.
Yes, sir.
You guys have been listening to Adam Sanders. And, check out the full album that will be released February 2nd. We'll put some liner notes in this episode. So check that out and get links to make sure you follow him and see his music. And hope you guys are having a great new year, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair. Make sure to give us a follow on Spotify if you enjoyed this episode, and make sure you click that notification button so you can keep notified when new episodes come out. We release brand new episodes every Tuesday, and you can find us on YouTube at Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to send us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episodes. We love getting your feedback, and share this with your friends. The more we grow, the more that we can keep doing this. It's our mission to bring you all of these great stories behind the songs from some of Nashville's most iconic artists and songwriters, publishers, producers, everyone in between, and a lot of my great friends. We love what we do, and we love sharing their stories with you. We appreciate all of the continued support. Thanks also to all of our sponsors, and we will see you all next week.